So this is a public workshop.
Yeah, no, let's wait for him. You ready to go? Good morning, everybody. Again, and welcome to our workshop this morning, which is a public workshop on the Chief Ombudsman investigation into local council meetings and workshops, obviously being run in an open session. So good morning, Diana and Lisa. Nice to see you both. Obviously the material has been circulated, but I don't have it before me because my computer's playing silly bugs again. So the floor is yours.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you for having us for this workshop. The purpose of today is to share with you some possible changes that we're intending to make with our operations as a result of the outcome of the Ombudsman's investigations to local council meetings and workshops. These are sort of generally quite operational matters, but we wanted to get your feedback before that they're implemented and taken forward. Sorry. Right, so just a summary of the overview. So in August last year, the Ombudsman initiated an investigation into council meetings and workshops, and that primarily focused on investigating 8 council practices. And the findings were recently published. And so we've gone through those as staff. And I guess the headlines are that the Ombudsman summarised that basically council is subject to the principles in the Local Government Act that were to be open, transparent and democratically accountable manner. The Ombudsman also recognised that workshops are a legitimate tool to use as part of that process leading up to a decision in a meeting. And the Ombudsman also recognised that workshops could be in a public excluded environment, but there were the conclusions that workshops should be open by default and only PE when it was reasonable to do so. And then the Ombudsman set out 24 expectations relating to council meetings and workshops. And so we as staff have gone through those, and we think as we do comply with those overall principles in terms of our activities with meetings and workshops. But we did look at those 24 expectations and we identified areas that we could look to continue to improve our current practices. And so just intend to outline what those changes will be, just to get your feedback.
Thanks, Diana. So the first area that we looked at was leadership and culture, and obviously leading with an open first environment, which we already do, but just enhancing our practices around that. One of the opportunities that we saw was to develop training for staff on the difference between governance and operations and what that means, particularly for people who are new to local government. It can be a lot for them to get their head around, and obviously there's quite a different lens that you put on things from as an operational staff member to a governor and somebody who is democratically elected on behalf of their community. We want to keep reiterating to staff the importance of openness and transparency. So of course that's a fundamental cornerstone of local democracy. And you know what they say, if you keep repeating things, it becomes ingrained, and that's the point that we want to get to. We also want to update the website to make clear that that's our commitment to our community, and have that flow through the likes of our accountability documents. And also make sure that the availability of council minutes are very easy to find on our website, and to give people the opportunity to complain to the Ombudsman if they are concerned about the way that we are operating in a public excluded environment. So that was one of the outcomes of the report, was just to make sure that there was something well, not significant, but something that was quite easily accessible on the website. So we're looking at doing that as well.
Right, just in terms of the Ombudsman went on to talk about some changes in the report as well as workshops. He had a look at meetings and gave some recommendations in relation to that. The first bullet point there on the screen is a question for you. What we do, sometimes our agendas aren't ready until the statutory deadline day. Sometimes they might be ready in advance. So really the question is in terms of your preference, do you want some reading in time where that is available before the agenda goes public? Or so then that you've had the opportunity to read the agenda before you might get questions from the community? Or are you okay with it that receiving the agenda is the same time that it goes on the website? So that's really a question that I'm putting to you that I'd like some feedback on today.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Susan. If it's available, yeah, I think it'd be great if you let us know that it was there and diligent for us to have a look at. You know, like we do get an email when it is loaded up anyway, which is usually coincides with the statutory deadline. But I think if it's available, if we could just be alerted or something. Is that what you had in mind?
No, what I'm talking about, like, because as soon as the agenda is ready, we make that available to you. And then there might be some time that we might wait for you to have a read. We were not against the statutory deadline. We could leave you to read that for a day or two. And so you've read it before you get questions from the community. Otherwise, the other option is that at the same time that we tell you the agenda is available in diligent, that we also publish that on the website. This is just for ones that are really early. We don't always have that option. Some of them are really statutory. So really want some feedback from you with those ones that are really early. Do you want them with some time to read them before you might get questions from the community? Is that, or do you happy with them on the website at the same time?
No, I prefer have them earlier.
Make them available. What the heck?
Yeah.
If I haven't read it, I'll just say I haven't read it.
Okay, so on the website at the same time as you get it, or the other way?
I prefer them earlier. If they're available, yeah, rather than putting them, appraising us of them at the same time as the statutory
Okay.
deadline. Yeah,
Okay, so to you first, and then we can
please.
put them on the website on the statutory deadline. That was just,
Which is what we do anyway, right? Unless it's something that an agenda that goes down to the wire and you're getting it out pretty close to
yeah,
our standard deadline on the same
if it's
day.
last stat day, then everything happens on the same day. It's just for those agendas where we have them early, just really
Yep, that would be helpful.
taking your preference that you'd like them early, and then we will put them on the website when we have to. So that gives you some time to read into them before you might get questions. One of the other recommendations that
Roger.
Please, through you, Madam Chair. Are we talking about all agendas here and all reading information? Because one of the things that happened the other day was that we had a workshop on a topic and we actually had no pre-reading information before that workshop. I did request that the information be distributed, but told that it would not be available until the meeting. Now, I don't think that that is good enough. And if it wasn't available until that time, then I believe the workshop should have been postponed until we had the information distributed to us. So I think that comes into consideration here.
I was just talking about this one. This slide is all about meetings and agendas, which is different from your workshops that you have, where there's no statutory deadline for material. There's sometimes you might have staff that do have pre-circulated material, sometimes there's not. So this focus really is, for this particular slide, is really on the meetings and agendas.
So I can raise this topic again in a subsequent slide.
Yes, there's not always pre-circulated material, and sometimes there's some benefit in, but
Susan, the bookmark online recordings here, could you just go over that? Like, is that going to be a change? Like at the moment, how do people find online recordings And how would bookmarking make it easier to find them?
Yes, yeah, I'm just going to
Oh,
go
you-
through the
okay,
slides. Yep. So, racing ahead. So one of the things that the Ombudsman did say in terms of making council report templates clearer for grounds of PE, because at the moment what we do is we use the wording in the legislation. The Ombudsman actually said, I think you should try and use more words that are more plain English, so it's easier to understand. So that will be a change that we will be looking to make too. So you will see some changes come through in that regard, if you're happy with that. We are also looking at doing formally quarterly meetings by staff. So we're proposing that it would be 3 of us. To just go through all the PE items from the agendas that have happened over the last quarter, to then see if there's some that we can proactively release. There will obviously be those ones that there's recommendations already in the report which says X, Y, and Z will be, released after the meeting or at some other set time. So that it's a separate additional process that we are looking to introduce there. And the other last item there, the bookmarking of online recordings, that's something that Lisa has proposed, which I think will be great, because at the moment it's just one whole video on our live stream. So some other councils do have that option where you can segment it down. So maybe Lisa, if you just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So one of the key drivers behind the Ombudsman's report was to increase accessibility, so public accessibility to information, and of course some of our meetings are quite long, so the recommendation here is to actually bookmark our meetings. So if you want to come in and if you want to come onto the website and just listen to a particular part of the meeting, you can actually go directly to that part of the meeting rather than having to sit through for 3 hours. So yeah.
Just on that, another thing about recordings is I understand you can only guarantee they're going to be there for 2 weeks or something after, they're not there for a long time. So because of capacity issues, I understand. Oh, no, so they are there there for a set
The
period?
ones that we live stream just go straight to YouTube, and then they are on YouTube for as long as YouTube's there.
On the PE stuff that you might retrospectively release, so you're meaning like a historical release of something that is no longer considered or no longer meeting the PE threshold, right? It's kind of hard to think of an example of what that might be.
No, so I suppose it will be about sitting down and going through the reports and seeing what we pull out. People do need to turn their minds to it when they're writing their report, to consider those release recommendations. But I suppose the thing about making those assessments as to whether something should be PE is you need to do it at the time that you're making the assessment. So it'll just be whether, things have moved on and there is something we can more proactively release. We may, because if people are good at proactively releasing in their reports, or things come up later, we may not pick up too much, but I think it's quite a good check, and one that a lot of other councils kind of do, and we can certainly see and report back on the quantity and type of information that's coming through as part of that exercise.
And it definitely wouldn't be PE recordings of discussions.
No, this is all about the agenda papers and the items. So it could be the report, or it might even be kind of a part of the report or something that just with the from the last quarter, with the transition of time, means that those grounds for public excluded are no longer there.
So moving along, the next area that the Ombudsman's report looked at was workshops. And so we've identified a few changes in terms of our current practices to address the Ombudsman's, expectations. The first one is that we'll publish in advance the agenda for workshops, which will also include PE items, but obviously we'll just say this, this issue will be considered in PE, and we'll include the PE reason. And that aligns with the Ombudsman's recommendations, and is all part of it, that open transparency. We will look to publish workshop materials on the website after they've been considered, so where it's open. And then we'll also have, just like we did with meetings, we'll have formal quarterly meetings that we can review the workshop materials that were in PE to see if those grounds no longer apply.
Is this where I raise? Right, do I need to repeat what my concern is with workshops? That we had a workshop the other day, which was public excluded. We had no prior reading material at all. The suggestion is that decisions aren't made in these workshops, but in fact, at that workshop, without divulging what the topic was, we were presented with 4 options on which we were requested to give our point of view. So if that's not making a decision, then I don't know what is. So I think that brings a question of, the
Roger, I
whole
think
process
there
of
was a-
workshops.
That was commercially sensitive discussion, so there was a reason for that. So I don't know that it's really appropriate to be raising specifics of a particular workshop without naming content, but it's probably not appropriate to talk in that level of detail. I appreciate your original question about the fact that
Okay.
why we're not provided with documentation beforehand. I share your
Yeah, and it was a real concern for
frustration
me.
with that,
Yeah,
especially if it is quite detailed. But I
Yep.
suspect in many instances it's staffing capacity in terms of time that they have to get these things to us.
but
I doubt it's willful.
still doesn't detract from the fact that as EMs going into that workshop, we should have had the information before we went in. If it wasn't available, then the workshop should have been postponed until we'd had the opportunity to read it.
I'll answer. I think, yeah, sure. It's probably best practice to have that stuff, no doubt. But the realities is that we have an organisation that has a lot on its plate, and we're trying as best we can as a governing group to get through as much as we can as well. And I'm not a great believer of just adjourning stuff and kicking it down the road until we feel that we're fully appraised. I mean, some of that's on us to be able to have the capacity to be able to consume that information on the fly. Granted, it's not always ideal, but there are situations where I think it's perfectly fine. But I guess some of that is the quantum and detail of the information that's provided in that workshop environment.
So the other issue that you need to be aware of, because often staff need to test the waters with you, is that particularly when it comes to legislation changes, and this was particularly relevant during the last government, there was been really short time periods in which to respond to changes. Now, some of those workshops were private, some were public, but critically, we needed a free and frank discussion and a steer from you in relation to how we ought to couch something, because we'd be seeking a retrospective approval at a subsequent council meeting. So sometimes we're driven by deadlines beyond our control.
To your point, I felt more frustrated about having to endorse submissions after they'd gone without consultation. I found that more annoying than potentially not having the benefit of documents days in advance in a discussion. At least we had the opportunity to discuss them in those instances, which we didn't get oftentimes at last year or earlier this year. Claire.
Yeah, and 2 points. One is about the pre-circulation of material. I can appreciate that staff would do their absolute best to get it out, but it's not always possible. But that the expectation would be that the presentation at the workshop takes that into account, and so that the presenter can take us through more like a step-by-step, so that it helps us absorb that information, which I think's been done pretty well. Yeah. The point that I wanted to raise is the situation where we might have a public excluded workshop and then later an open workshop, but that it's connected with the public excluded one. And that's something that I've got embroiled in last week or the week before. Yeah, like it is really difficult as an elected member where you, like the broad topic would be, say, the LTP, parts of it are understandably public excluded, but parts of them you're trying to keep it in the open. But there is a bit of a crossover, and it's really challenging as an elected member to remember to make sure that you don't make reference to something that was in the public excluded. And obviously I missed the boat on that. It's been a good thing, actually. I got phoned up about it, and I had a really good conversation with someone, which has actually helped me a lot, I think. But it might not always be that way. And so I'm just making an appeal that when the decision by staff is made whether or not they think it should be open or closed, that they take that into account, that the discussion may well stray into public excluded stuff. Yeah.
It's a point really well made, Claire. And it is it's tricky territory. Absolutely. Absolutely. So.
Yes, and I guess that all depends on the reasons for the rationale behind it, the public excluded. So yes, so we're going to proactively publish the material after it's been presented, because usually with workshops there's more of that timing factor, and then quarterly we'll review material that was public excluded to see if anything could now be in the open. I think I'm repeating myself.
Sorry, just as in terms of accessibility slide, as you know, we mainly, essentially we live stream our Tuesday committee meetings. That's been kind of a resourcing commitment. One of the things that came out of the Ombudsman report was kind of asking people to look at, you know, obviously with greater openness and transparency, whether they could live stream more meetings. It does pose a resource issue. You do need to look at kind of also where practicable. I know just, you know, looking at that list of committees up on there, we, you know, sometimes we've done things a bit differently, like with Premier and gone off site and things like that. You know, there's no option to live stream if you've got that scenario. We kind of can live stream here, and we can live stream in Kaipaki and with certainty, and then if we're off-site elsewhere, then that poses us a difficulty.
Yeah, so yes, the Pirongia Ward Committee has liked to try and meet in the different communities, even if it's just twice a year, like we do 4 meetings a year, and so 2 of them might be out in the communities, and that's been a really nice thing. So I'd be a bit sad if we couldn't do that. I don't know if it would be enough to say that we'd live stream 2 meetings a year or something. Yeah. And the other thing that I'm not particularly comfortable with is any meeting that is about allocating funds, because probably like my comment earlier about where you stray across the line and unwittingly divulge commercially sensitive information or, you know, financial information that would not be appropriate to have live streamed. Like, it's really difficult to manage when you're on the fly, that it'd be better to have separate sections of an open meeting where you're talking about that kind of thing, and so you know it's all going to be excluded or something, public excluded. Yeah, I mean, I just feel that it's quite risky, and the chance of offending either applicants or people that are wanting to, for instance, do events and that. Yeah, either that or I need a lot more training or something. Yeah.
I understand that that is what happens for the Cambridge and Te Awamutu community boards. They have a completely public excluded session where they deal with all of the financial conversations had around applicants for discretionary funding. So then they come out of PX and then they deal with their decision making, having having already, you know, talked about bank accounts and details and things that should remain confidential. So that there is already precedent for doing it that way.
I think Claire's possibly referring to the District Promotions Committee as well. That we
Yeah,
haven't,
absolutely.
yeah.
And just on that, like, it's not always about financial stuff either, you know, like it might be about the capacity of the organizer or past experience and things which are also personal things. Yeah. And because most of our meetings are actually about allocating funds, yeah, like, would you just say it's all public excluded, which isn't really achieving the outcome? Yeah.
Yeah, we do make the boards have that, you know, be in the open for those discussions, and they do, as part of their decision making on the grants, they do need to kind of weigh up the pros and cons of the organisations and the benefits and how they might want to allocate. And we do see that as important, that that's an open discussion, but we recognise now also that there's the potential that they might have those financial questions, which is why we always have the financial documents in a public excluded agenda. And then if they've got financial questions, it's up to the board, then they can decide that they want to go into PE, and they can go into PE and discuss those financial issues, but they can only discuss the financial issues, and then they have to come back out into the open to make their decision and weigh up those kind of pros and cons of the different groups.
You through your worship, just quietly, I just had the list of the committee meetings, and there are a few things that worry me. ARC, okay, we are actually often privy to a lot of internal information at the Audit and Risk Committee, okay? A lot of this is actually just internal working, that we're working with the community, we're working within ourselves, and a lot of these figures are not readily available at the time. They're often extrapolations of something that might happen, could happen. We do a deep dive, and quite often that involves staff and all sorts of things. I wonder at where we're going, how far we're going. Also ask a question, do you release contracts? The ones that we do in PE, you're going to release those? Because the information of some of those contracts we've signed would be of specific interest to some of the competitors of people that go out there. So we've got to be a little bit careful what we release and where we release. And even purchases of properties and things that we've done, or sales. We've got to be a little bit careful. These are commercially sensitive for a reason.
Yes,
and I just quietly think that we've been pushed a little bit too far. This ombudsman was what he's saying. I personally say that because I don't count. Look, central government doesn't do it. They sit in cabinet and you never hear a boo. We are being held accountable because there are certain complaints, and the media is probably one of the leading ones. So I talk a little bit against it. You know, I've seen what's happening in the media at the moment. Some of the questions are partly correct, but quite often quite incorrect. I just want to see what you had got answers to that.
Yeah, I think certainly as part of this process, we're not proposing that we're going to release confidential information. It's more about making sure that we're checking and seeing with the passage of time, which can happen with, you know, it can be some things about contracts or other things, or purchases of property. You know, once you've purchased a property, you know, 12 months down the track and you've been the owner, does the amount you pay for it, it's not got the same commercial sensitivities around it as when you were kind of in that negotiation phase of doing the deal and securing that price. So it's what we're proposing is that check with passage of time on a quarterly basis to say, hey, is there anything else that can be released? There may not be, there may be, but it's just having that kind of checking process. And obviously any information that is in public excluded that has come to a committee or council can only be released with the approval of the CE or the deputy CE. So as well as us doing the kind of checking and maybe identifying some things, then it will also go to the CE, deputy CE, for approval as another kind of counter check there.
Just want to ask one point. Lisa, what do we do around tikanga with our media contacts? I'm asking the question around, because I know that we have media contacts that are looking at why we're in PE. What kind of tikanga or do we meet with our media contacts to explain or to show them the parameters around? Because I actually wonder how much sometimes some of our media contacts actually know the stuff to why we have to go into PE. Yeah, just wondering that.
It's fair to say that we haven't done anything in my time here, but I've only been here for 3 months. So it's something that we can certainly look at.
I'm just wondering if that might appease some of those media contacts that are having a go at us when they don't understand everything, maybe. Just a comment.
So, excuse me. So thoughts on other potential committees that you might like to see live streamed from the list up there?
Joe, just before you respond to that, you just need to be aware of the resourcing requirements for this. So optimally, this room, which has got all the recording equipment, needs to be available. I think we can also live stream out of the Kaipeki room in Cambridge. So just, where practicable, because there are resource constraints both in terms of the venues as well as the people who have to attend, because for every committee you want live stream, we probably need 2 from governance support. Yeah. So, really keen to support the Ombudsman's drive in terms of openness, but it's there are resource constraints that we have to live within. So if you're outside of this venue, then there's additional cost to try and live stream.
Thank you. Next.
So no one had any comments on any additional committees?
I think we're very quick to throw up no answers, but with modern technology and stuff, it is easy and achievable to live stream outside the room. And I would quite like going back to the start of the year when we were talking about, going out to our communities and stuff. I mean, there's no reason why we can't try it. Yeah.
So just checking, where did everyone sit on any additional committees? Yes or no, or?
Well, I mean, regulatory, we do it here anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff's here. I mean, if we're in here, I mean, why not? It's not difficult to go,
So going back to previous discussions on a portion of the meeting going into public excluded if necessary, should the default position be with all committees that we live stream? Unless there is any specific reason for it to be public excluded. And I mean, I'm talking about the kind of committees that I'm talking about perhaps are urban mobility, Cambridge Connections, those committees where there is, to my mind, nothing that ticks that public excluded box. And there are members of the public on those committees as well.
Yeah, so Roger, we're suggesting the default position is meetings should be public where there are no issues that would require the matter to be public excluded because of commercial sensitivity or personal issues relating to people, and that we live stream committee meetings where it's practical to do so. And so that very much cuts to have we got the equipment to do that in the venue that you're holding the meetings, and have we got sufficient governance support staff to run the programs.
And I suppose just one other thing to couch this in this presentation is all about kind of committees and workshops of council. not other additional meetings that might be held in different parts of the organisation. This is really the focus is about around the governance table.
Can I just make a comment about Roger's comment? Is this going to, the governance staff largely sit in Te Awamutu, was my understanding. So to have meetings and to have this happen in Cambridge, I see a reasonable expense for the ratepayer here. And I see the possible risk of these meetings all being shifted over this side of the swamp. So there's two questions there. I'm picking up on Gary's cost thing to ship staff over there because the governance staff traditionally are here. I mean, I actually don't support this because I think there is a massive cost to this, and I actually think a lot of these meetings are going to be shifted over there, where they're paying us to travel over here.
It's just the Cambridge Community Board that we do over there, because we're just talking about here, we're just talking about the council and its committees. We're not talking about other meetings. So we don't actually have any, the only committees that we might have had in Cambridge might have been the Maungatautari Reserve Committee, which is not active at the moment. So that's the only one that we've had over that side of the district.
But urban mobility, what about Cambridge Connections? Where's it held? Cambridge?
We're just talking about here in terms of here is council committees. None of those are committees of council. They are other kind of groups that have been set up across the organisation. So we just this presentation and workshop and ideas we're talking about are just, you know, it's your service delivery, your ARC, your Prongi Award, your regulatory, those
Thanks
ones
for
that, you know, just.
And last but not least, social media post every week telling people what is going to be discussed where things are open. So that basically takes the meetings and workshops and puts them in a slide. We've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Needless to say, we're not getting a huge amount of likes. So the only way is up.
But yeah, good thing to do still.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know some years ago, I tried to make the effort on my social media channels to give a summary of some of the stuff we talked about, and it was always in video format. And people love it. Even if it's after the event, it's a way of connecting and making it personalised and actually and connecting in a more genuine sort of way, if genuine is at all possible on social media. But yeah, look, I think, engaging and trying to use those avenues and explaining what we're doing here and demystifying what we're doing here and the nature of the stuff we talk about can only be a good thing.
Cool. So next steps, we'll take on board your feedback and then we'll start, I guess from an operational side, implementing these changes to basically, I guess, enhance our transparency and openness and, you know, improve our current practices. But there won't be, you know, massive changes to what we're currently doing.
And just for sake of clarity, of the 8 councils investigated, we weren't one, just for the sake of clarity.
The only additional comment I'd make, Your Worship, is that this workshop is not capable of making decisions, but these decisions are mine to take. So it doesn't culminate in a paper coming to council for you to adopt. So staff will take these discussions on board as we look to implement the recommendations from the Ombudsman's report.
Thanks for that, Gary. And that is the end.